Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. I can't believe it's Friday again. It's just, the time's just flown by. It seems like 5 minutes since I was in London last week. Don't know where the time's going. Anyway, I just thought I'd pop by onto my YouTube channel and just chat to you about a few things that I've had questions about, and also to make a simple project, just something for fun. So I've been asked lately about my workshops, particularly by those of you that mainly look at YouTube, and that's where you've found me. Now, my workshops, I've got 98 workshops. I'm actually working on my 99th workshop. The workshops, excuse me, the workshops are all available to watch at your own convenience, and they're all pre-recorded. Apart from one, workshop 98, it's called Tag Along. And the Tag Along workshop, I don't know whether I've still got the, yes I have. So my Tag Along workshop, which is workshop 98, is going to work a little bit differently than my other workshops. In this workshop, I'm going to continually add to it. So I might add to it once a week, I might add to it 4 times a week, I might add to it twice a month. It's just going to be continually added to. And this is what we've made so far in the Tag Along workshop. And we're just going to keep going on and adding to our tags. So this is what we've created so far, and that is workshop 98. That particular one is £50 because I'll be continually adding to it. And it's going to be our group where we reconnect and go through things and just chat about anything in particular. I might do the odd live, but at the moment I'm actually doing videos and we're building up our tags using different techniques and colours, etc. So that's the tag workshop. Now the workshops at the moment, let me just put this back, which is easier said than done. Got so many cards everywhere. The workshops at the moment are buy one get one half price, which I've extended. And there's also another workshop that I really love as well. It's the stencil workshop, Delight in Stencils. Let me just find the first one. And the Delight in Stencils workshop is a favourite because you use your workshops and you create backgrounds like this. That's really textural, just so that you can see that. I think it's difficult. Let's see if I can just put a bit of light on. The light doesn't seem as good. There's actually crackle on there. You can't see that as well, but there is crackle on there. We've also got other backgrounds. If I just place it down here like that. So we've got backgrounds that we create in the stencil workshop, and it's a fab workshop. You can see that one's a little bit glossy, and I show you how to make backgrounds, you know, use bits that we've left over. There's lots of textural backgrounds as well, and they've come out beautiful, and I just love how they look. So obviously these are using all my stencils because, you know, I design my own product, so I like to use the product and show you how to use it. So just giving you sort of a quick overview of a couple of the workshops. But the backgrounds are wonderful in the stencil workshop, and you create all these backgrounds. So this is just a little quick overview just to show you some of the backgrounds that you create. This workshop is £35, and you create all these backgrounds in your workshop, and it's a really fun workshop. There's so many techniques, it's just full of ideas, which I absolutely love. So we won't go through that too much because you can see all the backgrounds that you create. Let's move that along a bit, just so that you can see that. So you create all those backgrounds in that workshop. So if you want to join a workshop, or you're unsure which workshops I have available, I've got a craft group on Facebook, which is called Tracy Evans Craft Addicts Create, Inspire, Share. and you'll see it on Facebook. And in there I've got an album that's got all the workshops in, and I've also got a PDF document as well that you can just print off, just to give you a list of the workshops. So that's the questions I was asked, and now I'm going to create a nice simple project. So I've got a piece of Pink Frog smooth card, and it's 6 inches square. And what I've done is I've cut a 2-inch square of the same Pink Frog card, and all that I've done is roughly draw around that 2-inch square onto my piece of card with a pencil. So I've just taken the 2-inch square and drawn around it. I've just done it by eye. I'm not into this measuring by the centimetre. I don't want to kill the joy, so I don't do measuring. So I've just literally drawn around them. It doesn't matter if it's a wobbly line. I've just drawn around those squares just to create 4 squares. I've got some embossing powder on my non-stick craft sheet because I was embossing something last night, and I can still feel the bits of embossing powder because it was quite late when I did that. So we'll just keep that. I've got a nail that's irritating me, that's broken. It's under my fingers. Anyway, I've got these here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some colour in those square panels. What I'm going to do first is take my water brush. Now what I don't want to do is, I don't want to flood the squares with too much water. I was just making sure that that was a clean brush that I was using. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that my brush has got plenty of water on, not so it drowns. And I'm just going to add a little bit of water to the square. It doesn't matter. You're not necessarily looking for straight lines. You're just placing it on there. It doesn't matter if it comes outside the lines slightly. It's not a problem. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding some moisture to that square, and you really need card that can take some moisture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my re-inker. So this is Distress Oxide Fossilized Amber, and I'm just shaking that side to side so that it doesn't come out of the bottle, mainly because mine were used for workshops, and because ladies use them in the workshops, some of the re-inker is in the lid. That's because they shook the bottles up and down. So I'll just give that a little bit of a wipe. Not that it makes much difference when you've got it in the lid. So we'll just leave that lid off. And then what I'm going to do, you can see I've got the tiniest dot here. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the fossilized amber. And I'm just sort of working that with a little bit of water, just so that it moves. So that's what I'm doing. I'm then going to take a little bit of spiced marmalade, which is also, the bottle's in a total mess, but I still use it. And I'm just going to add some of the spiced marmalade. Now you can see this is very rich, and it's got a lot of sort of pigment in there, because this is your re-inkers. So your re-inkers have got lots of colour in there. What I'm going to do is just grab a little wipe, with my bottles being in such a mess. Let's just grab a little bit of a wipe. And we can just pick up a little bit of the colour and just move that a little bit. I'm just doing one at a time at the moment. And then I've got Lumberjack Plaid. And you can tell when I've bought a new colour. So I'm just shaking this side to side. And you can tell when I bought a new colour because it's not in such a mess, because it wasn't used for workshops. So let's just add a little dollop of that. And I'm not adding much of that colour, it's just here, just a little bit of that colour. And you can just add a little bit of water, pick up your colour, and then you can just add little bits of the colour. And what you can do is you can go back at any point and add a little bit more water, or you can spritz it gently with water. But you don't want to spritz it too much because you don't want to end up with it everywhere. So just a little spritz is absolutely fine. So we've just got a little bit of colour there. I don't mind it going outside the lines because it looks a little more natural for me. So that's what I like. So what I'm going to do is just pick up some more water. Now, it doesn't matter that my brush is slightly tinted this time. It's not a problem. I quite like the fact that I'm using the colours, so it's not really a problem if the water's slightly tinted. So what I'm going to do is go to that fossilised amber and just add some of the fossilised amber, and then I'm going to add a little bit of the spiced marmalade. Just add the spiced marmalade. Now I'm just showing you what happens when you're just adding a little bit of water. You can see it moves, but it doesn't move a vast amount. It would, obviously, if you were using a traditional watercolour paper, it would actually bleed out more. But watch, when you just spritz it with water, it moves a lot more. And they sort of blend and merge into each other, a bit like marbling. So it's fun. And you can just drag a little bit of that colour out, just like so. Now, there's nothing complicated about this. There's no complicated technique. Anybody can do that. So it's really easy to do. But because I'm using the re-inkers, because it's a very strong colour, because you're using the re-inkers and it's very concentrated, it works rather nicely for giving a rich colour. Plus, I've got these re-inkers and I rarely re-ink my ink pads. They're there for that if I want them, but I tend to use them for techniques because I like there to be different ways that you can use things, for me personally. So I'm just picking up, let's pick up, I think we need a little bit more of that orange. So I think what I'll do is I'll give these lids a really good clean when I've finished. Mind you, I said that every time and I'm sure I've done it before. So let's just add. Now you can see when you've got those colours, you can just dab it. But the red, the lumberjack plaid, is a nice strong colour. And you can easily go back and add more of one colour if you wish. But if I spritz, it moves. And you can see this colour here is not as strong as that colour there. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit more orange. Let's just clean that brush a little bit and pick up the concentrated orange. And you can just dab it into the red. So you can pick up that orange and dab it into the red like that. Just dab it into the red or dab it off. But if you dab it into the red, you sort of get like a circle where you've dabbed it. So it's quite novel. Doesn't take much to make me happy. But what I'm going to do is, you see that colour that I add on the side of my non-stick craft sheet? Don't wipe it up. You can just blot it onto another piece of card. But I don't want to get into that because I just want to concentrate on this. But you can just blot your card. Can you see it's moving here and bleeding slightly outside, which is absolutely fine. So what I'm going to do is take some fresh water. And you can see the water's not clean because obviously I've got all that orange colour in my brush. So sometimes what I do is I clean the brush a little bit, because your colours become obviously a little contaminated when they're all on your desk at the same time. So you don't want it to sort of be all orange. You want some different tones. So let's just, the water is tinted with fossilised amber. Absolutely fine. And what that card is there, it's moist, but it's not soaking wet. So there's your one flat colour. Let's add a little bit of orange. Let's add a little bit of that orange. And you can just dab that just inside your square. And again, for me, that looks okay, but it hasn't got a bit, it needs a bit of oomph. So that's why I add the lumberjack plaid. You can add fired brick, you can have candied apple, whatever you want. It just brings a little bit more vibrancy with the red. Now for me, that's okay, but when you spritz with water, a whole different feel, because it merges better. So let's just use that bit of kitchen roll just so I can pick that up. Bit of clean water. And what I can do now is go into the water and then pick up this orange and watch as I dab it in the red. You can just see it starts to bleed in to the red. And that's the bit I like. I can't pick the card up, mainly because I don't want it to move anywhere else, but I can see it moving. It's as if you were using alcohol inks when you weren't. But it just, that one I can really see. If you wanted to, you could just drop the re-inkers in, but I think that would be too much and it would be too overpowering. So I can go in again, look, and add some more of the orange, just so that bleeds out. And it seems to work nicely when you've got something like the dark colour, like the red. It works really nicely. So let's do this again. So this time, have a look at your project and just think, is there anything else I want? So if you wanted a little bit of the red, pick up the lumberjack plaid and go over the top. And this is like playing when you're a child, but it's sort of, what happens is you place it in the water and it goes, but only because I've spritzed it. Because I've spritzed it, it works better. And it's just going like that. And what I'm doing is I'm giving it time to do its thing. Because if I go in with the heat tool now, it'll instantly stop moving. And I quite like the fact that it's moving. And it's just coming out of the squares in a few places, which is absolutely fine. What you can do is you can mop this up, all this colour up, with a piece of spare card. I'm just going to just clean my brush. I like to do simple things. So you've got the water here now, which you can't see, but there's fresh water there. And you can even go in with a little bit of water and just react a little bit more by just adding little dabs of water as well, just to change it a little bit. So you can do the dabs of water as well. So I'm loving the red, and each time that you do it, it will look a little bit different. So I'm going to take a little bit of the lumberjack plaid. I'm going to pick up the lumberjack plaid and I'm going to add, I just love how it moves. You know, I'm like a child. Love how that moves. And if it doesn't move enough for you, because that one's been sitting there, then just spritz again with the water and it will just move for you. I just love how it moves. And I love the richness of that colour. Now, if I wanted to, I could put a piece of card over the top and mop up the colour so that I'd got another background. But I don't want to do that because I don't want to affect the richness of colour. So what I'm going to do, while that's just doing its thing for a few moments, I'm going to waffle to you. And then I'm going to clean my re-inkers that I keep sort of saying that I'm going to do, but I never do. And they're in a complete and utter mess because, to be honest, they've never been cleaned since I did workshops, and that's a long time ago, at least 3 years. So we'll just pick up our lid. This is why you don't shake them up and down. Obviously, when I went to workshops, ladies, when they first get them, it's automatic to shake them up and down. So I'm just going to just clean inside the lid. Obviously, we don't just want to watch that. I'll do the others after the video, but that orange one was in a rather mess. So let's just move that out of the way. You could also let your baby wipes dry, and they go really dry, quite crispy, and you could machine stitch those onto a piece of card as well if you wished. But don't underestimate how wonderful the re-inkers are and how wonderful they are for adding vibrancy of colour. They work so well. So I'm just giving my hands a little bit of a clean and getting rid of any dirty sort of pieces. Now, if you can, you would let those dry naturally. I don't worry about my hands because the minute I shampoo or get in the bath, that'll all come off. So if you shampoo your hair or you get in the bath and use bubble bath or anything like that, it'll soon come off. And you wouldn't get that anyway because your bottles won't be in such a mess. Once the re-inkers have stopped moving and you can see that they're now staying put, you can dry that. If you can let it dry naturally, you're going to get a much, much deeper, richer effect. But I haven't got time for that. So what I'm going to do is just give that a dry with my heat tool. There's no point me putting my heat tool on it yet. I need to let the heat tool heat up. So if you let it dry naturally, you'll get these darker areas and they will stay dark. What I've done is I've let it sort of rest a little bit so that it's done a little bit of the work and it's reacted. Now with re-inkers, because they're highly concentrated, some of the pigment will rest on the top, and that's why you've spritzed with water, so it just doesn't sit there floating on the surface. So what I'm going to do now is just give that a dry. And I'm drying gently, and the reason I'm drying gently, and what I mean by that is holding the heat tool quite high up, is so that I don't move that colour. As it dries, you will see the oxidisation a lot more. So let's just let that dry. Let's turn this around a little bit, and you will see the oxidisation a lot more as it starts to dry. You can see this one here, that is still moving because that hasn't had as long as some of the others to dry. So what I'm doing is I'm just let that just sort of soak in the card a little bit more so we don't move it, but you can see where it's feathered out around the edges, and I love that. Absolutely love it. So what I'm trying to do is not go too close, and I'm just sort of holding it up a little bit just so that I don't move that colour too much. Just so that where I've got the darkness, it stays a little bit darker than the rest of the card. I will lift this up shortly so you can see all the feathering, etc. And because I've got a good quality card, 300 GSM, I can bend that back into place, so it's not a problem. The only reason I'm not lifting at the moment is I don't want to move this colour too much. And I could use my kitchen roll just to mop up that colour, but it seems a shame not to take advantage of that deep, rich colour that we've got. And then I can show you a couple of things once this is dried. It's just drying now. You can see some of the moisture evaporating with the heat from the heat tool. So let that just. What I'm going to show you, so I'm going to lift this up, she says confidently, just so that you can see. Obviously this is still wet here, but can you see where I was dabbing it into the colours, where you got those circles? I didn't do it so much on these two, but you can see where I dabbed into the re-inkers. You can see that there. Now what I'm going to do is, I've got a piece of, don't want a piece of card. Yeah. So what I'll do now is, there's still a lot of pigment sitting on there, so I'm going to give another little spritz, and then just dry it. Just to oxidise that a little bit more. And then what I'll do is, the bit of moisture I've got outside the squares, I'll just dab that, the little bit of moisture I've got outside the squares. And the reason I'm doing that is so that there's less of that concentration of ink sitting on the surface. Now you saw me spritz that with water, so we'll just tell the card who's boss and just bend that back again. Just bend it back. There we go. And we've got, let's see how much is sitting on the surface. You can see there's still ink sitting on the surface, but that's obviously because where it's more concentrated, it's still sitting on there, as you can see. You can see that was from here. So it's important that I just wanted to show you that. That's why we spritz with water, so that that concentration of ink isn't just sitting on there. So I'm just blotting with my kitchen roll, just to take any excess moisture or whatever is in the card, because I'm going to stamp on the top of that. And I can still see a little bit more moisture because I can see it shining rather than it being flat matte. So I'm just going to give that another little dry. There we go. And then I'll use a piece of copy paper because that will just suck up any of the moisture. Can you see? So it just sucks up any of the moisture that you've just got left on there. There we go. So you do have to be a little bit patient, especially when you're using something as concentrated as the re-inkers. There we go. So I've now got beautiful richness of colour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of my text stamps. And what I want to do is grab another piece. You know, when I said earlier, I felt like there was a bit of embossing powder on my desk. Well, it was on that copier paper because I'd obviously tipped it onto that copier paper. go, look how much. So you just need to remember to blot. Exactly like you would with the VersaFine Clair, you just need to blot. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I want to use this flower. Got that many stamps just here. Let me just grab the piece of card. I want to use the Periwinkle. Periwinkle stamp 987, which I just love. And when I'm unsure where something's going, I just use the acetate. It seems predictable to go and stamp it in the middle there. I don't want to do that. I want mine slightly offset, like so. I want it slightly there. So I think it's probably a good idea to stamp that first, mainly because then I can judge where I want everything else. Sometimes the focal image can dictate anything else. Rightio. So I'm going to use my VersaFine Clair. So let's ink up. I'm using my VersaFine Clair Nocturne. Now, this is a sort of part silhouette stamp, part not. So what I want you to do is give that a really good inking. Really good inking. Tap it once, tap it again. And use a tapping motion because you'll tap on a good layer of ink. And like me, you may over because the ink pad is longer than the actual stamp. So you may add over inking. So let's bring this in and you can tilt your stamp to see that it's wet. And it's funny because that bit there doesn't look as wet as the others. Ink once, ink twice, and ink one just in case. So I'm just going to add, I want it slightly off, slightly down, there. And I often faff for England. Now what I want you to do is just take a little bit of care. You've got oxide inks under there, so you're not going directly onto the card. And because you're not going directly onto the card, you can't just plonk your stamp on there and lift it within 3 seconds. You just need to let it sort of suck into the card. So you just need that to absorb into the card. That juicy VersaFine Clair ink. And it's a very juicy ink pad. It stays wetter longer. It's got a good open time. And the reason we like it is because it's got a good open time, because it can pick up that detail and also it can go on to that layered inky surface. So I'm just allowing that to soak in there. And then what I'm going to do is just lift my All and Create acrylic block. And as I lift, I make sure I'm still holding part of the acrylic block. So I can just lift that and then curl the stamp. And what you end up is with a beautiful image. Now, I often hear people say, well, when you stamp with the oxide, when you use oxide inks underneath, especially this concentrated, it can affect your VersaFine Clair a little. Yes, it can, but I love that effect. That's part of it. It's just lovely. For me, I love that. And I love the fact it's not just plonked in the middle. Just lovely. Now, the one important thing you need to remember is that you've stamped this onto that really rich inky backdrop. And it's not absorbent. It's just that ink is just sitting, it's floating on the top. So what you need to do is just give that a blot. Don't go in with your heat tool straight away. Just give that a blot, just to prevent any smudging and to get rid of the bulk of ink, which saves you from using your heat tool so long on your card. So just blot that. Hey, we've not done too bad. There's not too much ink come off there, and I'll tell you why. So let's just try again to make sure I'm not faking it. Make sure I am rubbing over the flower. Let me do that. Hey, I've done a pretty good job there because no ink's come off, and I'll tell you why. Because I made sure that these re-inkers below were very dry. They were spritzed with water so that it wasn't just sitting on the top. The spritzing with water helped it to blend and move and soak into the card. It wasn't just sitting on the top. I can see a little bit of re-inker. If I just turn, can you see that little bit of shine? So there'll be a little bit of ink sitting on the top of there. And I can prove that if I use this clean bit of card here and I go to them there. Let's just rub over. There you go. So you can see that that is just sitting on there, whereas I dried this thoroughly. So you do need to make sure that you blot and dry. And you know when it's dry, because now it's gone a lot more matte, so it's a lot drier. So you always have to weigh up when you're using products that were designed for re-inking ink pads and you're using them in a different way. But I love to challenge things to be used in a different way. So what I want to do now is let's just put this stamp back. My hands are hilarious, the colour of them, just so funny. Right. There's nowhere to put anything, but that's standard practice. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to use my 30 days stamp set 922. It's got 60 seconds equals 1 minute, 60 minutes 1 hour, 24 hours 1 day, and then it's also got 30 days has September, April, June and November. All the rest have 31 excepting February alone, which has 28 days clear and 29 each leap year, which I just love because it's sort of talking about the year, which is perfect for sort of flowers and plants and that kind of thing, or just for a background stamp. Now what I want to do is add some background stamping, and I'm just going to use it as is. So I'm going to use this one that talks about the months. So I'm just going to ink my stamp up, and I'm using the Morning Mist, and I'm just going to add a little bit of stamping into my square. Love it. And I'm using the grey because what you want is you want this focal image to be the focal image. So you want the grey to appear in the background, which it does rather nicely. So I'm just adding a bit of stamping just to the background of each square. I'm just adding that background just so that I lift that up, just so that you can see the little touches of background. So I'm then going to just blot that, just to make sure that we haven't got no ink that's going to smudge. But it look, I can't hold that there, but it's looking rather nice. And we will add some touches of white to this as well. So that's the grey. So I want a little bit more black sort of to these squares so that they come into this design here. So what I'm going to do is let's place that back, and I'm going to use stamp set 994 number Graffiti, which is another favourite. I love little background stamps. They just make me happy. But can you see this bit of card that I've just, you know, when I blotted some of the ink up and I just went on here and I blotted some of the ink up? That'll be perfect for sort of a little bit of a background as well that I can use in some way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Nocturne ink, and I'm going to ink up some of those numbers in black. And what I'm going to do is just extend the design just a little bit more, just to add a little bit of black. So I'm going to bring that into the other squares as well. and I'm enjoying myself just taking my time. So I'm going to add no, you're not, Tracy, because you didn't ink that bit up, Flower. It's this bit you inked up. There you go. So I'm just adding some of the black to bring that pop. And what that black does is pushes that grey into the background, which I absolutely love. Let's try making sure that I use the bit that I've actually inked this time. It's usually a good sign. So I'm going to add a little bit here. And then let's go back to this little 5 bit. Just add a little bit there. There we go. I love it because you just get little bits of the numbers, so it's just lovely. And what I can see now is I can see that black, particularly on this area here, is just sitting there. So I'm just going to blot it all. And it'll just save me from using that heat tool. You can use the heat tool if you want, but the less I use it, the less the card will curl. But obviously you get a bit of curling when you use moisture. That's understandable. Let me just do that little bit of a 5 there. Perfect. And you can just see just how that's going. Absolutely love it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my gel pen. I'm going to make sure that works because I know what I'm like. There we go. So just to get it flowing a little bit, just to add some touches of white, just here and there, just to I'm just adding a little pop of white there. Let me just hold this up for you, just so that you can see that. Just absolutely love it. And you can just sort of reiterate the white if you wish. So I'm just going around there. And what I'm going to do is just add Posca pen, but that's going to be at the end. No, we'll do it now. So we're going to add some of that Posca. Just now I'm going to do it in 2 different sort of ways. If you wanted to keep everything flat, then you could keep it like this. Now if I grab a scrap of card, let's bring in the floral again. Oops. I like to show you lots of different ways. So if we take this, always experiment with what you're doing. Just make sure that what you're doing you're happy with. So I always test different things. Oh, that's slightly embossed with hearts. So I always test different things. So you can see with this, you can see the colours through. What I want to do is show you. Let's just cut this out. So I'm just going to cut the flower out, and then we can look at what it looks like when you've got white of the flower on the top. I'm using my Pergamano scissors. You can use nail scissors. quite like the Pergamano scissors because they've got a slight curve, but you can get curved nail scissors as well, quite cheaply. So just cutting the floral out. And this is how I create at home. This is actually a quick card to do. Obviously, you've had me waffling for 10 minutes at the beginning, and then you've had me waffling, describing, going through why I do things. So obviously, the card's going to be a lot quicker for you. There we go. Now, let me just add a little bit of... You can add, so let's have a look through the camera. You can add the white and that will pop a little bit more for you. So what I'm going to do is lift, and you see that you get the tone on tone, just so that you can see that. That's a 1-layer card, and with this you get the white, and we can add a little bit of colour just to the heart. So let's add just a little bit of colour to the heart. So what we'll do is we'll take a little tiny bit of the orange, don't even need that much really, and then we'll take a tiny bit of red. That's all you need. We'll just, let's test our little brush. There we go. Grab a little bit more water. And what I can do is just pick up the little bit of orange, dab the red, and just add a little bit of the red, and just let it do its own thing. So what I'll do is we'll give that a little dry so I can dab some more of the orange in. So I'm just drying the little heart a little bit. At the moment it's, what's the word, it's very red. Let's pick up the orange. I'm just changing it a little. Yes, it's a bit I'm being a bit of a fuss pot. But I want it a little bit more two-toned. Don't use your fingers, use your scissors to hold it down. Just make sure you don't heat your fingers, which is easy to do because I do it quite frequently. You could quite easily blot it, but that sort of defeats the whole object. I want to dry it. There we go, it's drying now. There we go. So what I've got is I've got a little bit of both colours just in the floral. Oh, I can't pick it up now. Do you like how I can't pick it up? So I've just got a little bit of colour in the floral. So you can just bend that, and then we'll bring this into our project, and you've just got that touch of colour in the floral. Let's just mop these up. I don't need to add the leaves. You see, this is what I end up doing. So I'm like, do we want to add the leaves? And this is how projects develop, because you change your mind as you go through the process. And I think it's important to show the process. So I've got the leaves. Let me just cut those out. Because if I was sending this to somebody, I don't mind having some dimension, because I either drop it off personally, or wrap it up in tissue, or I create a box, whichever I prefer to do. There's one. So it's up to you what you prefer to do and who you're sending it to, really. Now, if you want to do the one layered card, absolutely fine. So let's see. Where's that just gone? There we go. And what I'm going to do is just pinch the leaves just a little bit. Oh yes, we're going to have the leaves on. I'm just going to pick this up and pinch it. Just gives it a little bit more life if I just pinch it a little bit. Plus, I like faffing. Let's just add a little bit of that. So I've just curled the leaf a little bit. And that's why you should always play, because it's interesting where play leads you. Let me just put the lid on that, and then just press that down with my scissors to make sure it's stuck down. And now it just pops nicely. It really does pop, really lovely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more. I didn't stick the flower down, did I? Do you like how I blew it and then I didn't stick it down? That's hilarious. So I'm just adding a bit of adhesive to the centre, just so that I can leave those petals just stuck up a little bit. There we go. And I've just bent the petals a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more of that Posca. Just so that we've got it on the leaves, we've got it on the flower. Turn your card because you'll hit different areas, which is quite nice as well. And then on the same stamp set, the Periwinkle, we've got the word, the Periwinkle and the Vinca Minor. So let's just add that onto some white card. And we'll just add that. And I love to while away an hour just creating for the sake of creating, because it's supposed to be about fun. So I like to do it just for fun as well. I know I'm sharing with you, but I like to share in my process and enjoy at the same time. And it's like I'm in company as well, in good company. So first of all, I'll cut it out like this. And then I'm going to cut it so that it's separate. And sometimes you'll see me put a black border around, but before I put a black border around, I like to test. So yes, we do want a black border around, but sometimes I test before I do anything just to see whether I want that black border around or not. There we go. And I'm just pulling it towards me a little bit just so that I don't go into the ink that's already there and smudge it everywhere. Now, you could put it on a piece of white card, then you don't get it on your non-stick craft sheet. The only problem with that, I find, is that because you're on white, I can't see what I'm doing. Perhaps it's just me, but I can't see what I'm doing if I do white on white and put the white card on underneath. I can't see the edge of the card. So what I'm going to do now is decide where I'm going to place them. So one's going to go there. I think the other one can just go here. Yes. And you'll know when you're creating your card what makes you happy in your composition, because you'll see something completely different to what I see. It's all part of it. And that's why art is very subjective. There we go. Let's take the periwinkle. And just add the periwinkle. Just there. Take it in a bit. That's it. See, I'm now loving this. And I do know, you know, it's funny, isn't it? You do know sometimes when you cut bits and pieces out whether that works better. So I just want one last little touch. Let's just place that back. I'm trying to get into habits of just placing things back because you're getting such a mess. Right, what I want now is just another, oh, what a surprise, just another stamp. Let's see if it's in with this lot. Is it in with this lot? No, I don't think it's in with this lot, is it? Oh. I want this little bird for another favourite stamp, Quill Ends. So I want that little bird there from Quill Ends. You should know this is a favourite stamp by now. You've seen me use it often enough. So I'm just going to take the little bird, which I just adore. Like so. Lovely. Adore that bird. And you can tell I'm going to need a bath after this. Hey, how many projects do you do? You actually need a bath afterwards, Tracy. So I'm just cutting around the bird and I'm leaving a very, very subtle white border. Just subtly around the edge. There we go. And I can just add my little bird looking at the flower. There we go, it's just looking at the flower. Now I just want to make sure the bird is part of the composition. So I'm just going to add a couple of splatters, just so that's part of the composition. And if we hold that up, just so that you can see that. And then if we bring in the card, my card is 6.5 inches square. Now, me personally, I'm afraid it's going to have a black mat. So if you can bear with me. Go. So I've cut out a black mat because firstly I wasn't going to do a black mat, but for me, you know, sometimes I add cards like that just straight to the white card. For this one it needs a black mat, so let's move that out of the way. Bring in the black mat. Now it sings, absolutely, definitely. Right, so let's just add our adhesive. Now what you've got is you've got a piece of card that's had loads and loads of moisture added to it, so there's no point scrimping on your adhesive. I mean, if you've got double-sided tape, that's a bit different, but if like me you're using a wet glue, you can't scrimp on it. You need to add some to the centre of the card because it just wants to work against you. So pick your card up and sort of bend that so that the adhesive and that it gets in the middle. If you're worried about your card, just press on using copier paper, just so that, because you can see here already on that top corner, it's fighting against me because it's curled and the adhesive hasn't grabbed a hold yet. So what I do is I just go round, just keep going round, just to make sure that's stuck down. There we go. And the black card will stick to the white card really easily. But what I want to do now is I'll add that to the 6.5 inch square card blank. And the black just makes the design pop, particularly with those lovely bright colours. Now, I'm not fighting against it now because the black card didn't have all the moisture added to it. So I'm not fighting with that as much now. So it's Pink Frog smooth card all the way through the process. Right, we've not finished yet. You don't have to rush the process, and at the end of the day it's Friday, so we don't have to rush, do we? That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. Right, so what I need to do now is make sure my brush is totally clean, and all I'll tell you is, if you didn't think re-inkers had got a lot, that they weren't concentrated, go to clean your brush out and you'll be surprised how concentrated and how much cleaning you need to do of your brush. And it goes to show you the concentration. Well, you're re-inking ink pads with them, so it's bound to be. So I've just rinsed it through. Now, if you were rinsing it in a jar, it would be a lot less. But sometimes when we do it in a jar, you think one dunk and that's it. Not with re-inkers. You need to just take your time. Right, I'm going to take my Inktense pencil and I'm just going to add some Inktense pencil just around the square. Now, you're not looking for immaculately straight lines, it's just doodled. So don't go for immaculately straight lines. If that plays with your head, then fair enough. But for me, I'm going for sort of, well, it's artistic license, isn't it? So I'm just going to add, there we go. So I'm just scribbling around the outside edge, to be honest. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is just take my water brush and I'm just going to blend that out. And if you think, oh, that's too much, just dab. Just dab. So I'm just going to blend that out. So just take your time and just go around and activate. And if you haven't activated, if you find that, like for me, for a start, I don't think I've drawn around that one, you know. There we go. Just a bit under there. I don't think I activated that one. I don't think I drew around it, to be honest. There we go. That's better. Just go around and just activate. Just to make everything pop a little bit more. You're sort of just touching the black intense pencil. If you find that it's too dark for you, just take a little bit off. There we go. And it just reiterates those squares for you. So then when you've done that, add a few more splatters just outside the squares as well. Just so it's outside the squares as well. And then if we lift that, look at the state of my hands. You can still see where those dots are. I've got some splatters here now, but you can see where those dots are, where it added the colour. Just love it. Now when this is dry here, I will add a touch of white to that. But I'm absolutely thrilled with that. I absolutely love it. Just a different look. And it makes me happy. If you want to continue to add it even darker, you just need to go in with your Inktense pencil again. And you can add it darker. Just on the corners as well, if you wish. It's entirely up to you. There we go. Let me just... So let's have a look at that. So just on that corner and just on this corner here, let's just add it a little bit darker. Just on those corners, just to reiterate them. Brilliant. That's lovely. So now that is finished. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed just spending some time with me. I've loved it. And I hope I'm doing the right thing and sort of doing a mix of projects, really quick projects for 15 minutes, some more detailed projects, just waffling now and then, just to stay in contact with you all. So I'd like to say love to all. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Am I really saying that again? Feels like 5 minutes since I said weekend. And I hope you enjoy some of the decent weather that we're supposed to be having this weekend. So love to all, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.